Gordon Dalby, one of the authors who has written about the father wound, has described the father wound as a shotgun blast to the chest. The World Needs a Father curriculum out of South Africa presents research on fatherlessness, researching the curse of fatherlessness. And in that curriculum, Stephen Baskerville out of Howard University says virtually every major pathology has been linked to fatherlessness: violent crime, drug and alcohol abuse, teen pregnancy, suicide, all correlate more strongly to fatherlessness than any other single factor. Research in many countries over the last 5 years has shown that dysfunctional family life is the biggest problem in the world, and fatherlessness is at the center of the problem. With men committing 90% of major crimes, men commit nearly 100% of rapes. Men commit 95% of burglars. Men commit 91% of the offenses against the family. And men comprise 94% of drunk drivers. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Life is in relationships, and relationships are life.
Welcome to This Is Us podcast. I am Latoya Berry Jones.
I am Terry Jones. Our stories,
your stories.
Our journey,
your journey.
Welcome to episode 8.
Yeah.
This evening, we are going to encourage, we are going to suggest, we are going to express to you and encourage. Call him Daddy. We're going to be exploring a daughter's journey to connecting with and forgiving an absentee father. Our guest this evening will share with us her story, our story, about the fatherhood, dealing with an absentee father, but more importantly, the story of the journey into forgiveness, the forgiveness that we want to encourage this evening, the forgiveness that we want to talk about, the possibility, the how, and everything on that journey in between. We want to welcome our guest this evening. Who is our guest this evening?
Our guest this evening is no other than Marjaalaine Francis. I hope I got the pronunciation of your name correct. She'll be joining us tonight on episode 8 of This Is Us podcast. We're happy to be here. We're happy to have you here with us. Thanks to all our friends on Facebook and YouTube as usual who continue to join us each week. Thank you for being up here with us. Thank you for being our audience. We welcome your questions and your comments. And tonight is no different. If you have a question or comment for our guest, you can post your questions, your comments, and we'll be sure to connect with you throughout the show. If you have any questions for our guest, then we will get some time for her to address those questions and comments as we go through tonight's show. So tonight, as my co-host said, we are talking about a very sensitive topic for some and a very okay topic for some and a taboo topic for some, because some have never gone through fatherlessness, some can't relate, some can relate, and you have those persons who are probably not handling it so well. And tonight, Marja is here to share her story, her journey on an absentee father. So let's hear some more about Marjaalaine. Marjaalaine Francis is a social worker actively involved in youth and community development, a volunteer youth mentor and empowerment facilitator with the Bob Marley Foundation and Youth for Development Network. A certified life coach she is, producer and host of Moments of Hope, aired on Love 101 Radio in Jamaica. Outside of work, she enjoys teaching biblical principles, cooking, going to the beach, and spending quality time with family and friends. Help me welcome Marja Elaine to our podcast tonight. Hi, Marja. How are you doing?
Hi, Latoya. I'm doing well. Hi, Teddy. I'm
Great.
well.
You look well.
Hey, Marja.
Thank you.
Good to have you here with us.
Good.
And thank you for coming to help us talk about this issue that is a very, very prevalent issue in our society across the Caribbean, on the African continent, in North America, in Asia, in Eastern Europe, in Latin America. Just about every country in the world is affected by the issue of absentee father, by the father wound. And in fact, there's a particular passage in the Bible, Marja, in the last book of the Bible, of the Old Testament rather, Malachi, which gives a strong indication that fatherlessness is actually a curse. That where fatherlessness is prevalent and remains, that the land remains under a curse. Where the prophecy was given of the ministry, the coming ministry of John the Baptist, that one of the specific missions of John the Baptist to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and to turn the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I strike the land with a curse. That's what Malachi says. And so that was a very critical part of the ministry of John the Baptist. And we see so much of the spin-offs of fatherlessness, as I open with some of what the research is indicating from places around the world where men in particular have been affected, and the cycle, the ripple effect, and the cyclical effect of the impact of fatherlessness. So it's really great to have you. Latoya read a little bit about you, the formal, the official introduction, and I know that that's just a little snippet. So who is this Marjaalaine Francis?
Marja Elaine Francis. I like to consider myself as a multidimensional Jesus girl. When I say multidimensional, because I just don't do one thing. Sometimes persons ask, where do you work? What do you do? You're in so many different things, because I believe that God has gifted me to make an impact. And so wherever I can, I serve in those areas. I'm passionate about transformation of lives, and I get to do that in being a social worker, and also by recent adding an author, a life coach, yes, a speaker, host of Let's Talk Father, so many things that I get to do, where I get to connect with people, share my journey, hear their story, and see in what area I am able to assist them. I maybe want to start from primary school. I grew up, I was born at the Princess Margaret Hospital. I want to think
you're a St. Thomas girl.
Yeah, I want to think that I'm a princess because I was born at Princess Margaret Hospital. Yes, and I stayed there for a short period up to infant school, and then moved to Kingston, where I went to the Harborview Primary School, then went to Shortwood practicing for a short while. Then for 1 year, I went to Yallis Primary, which is in St. Thomas, and then moved back to the Harborview Primary School, where I completed grades 4, 5, 6.
Cyclical.
That sounds like quite a lot of looping.
Yeah, you'll hear all the looping, right? And then
yes, you're gonna have to tell us what was up with that. I mean, and all of this is in primary school, right?
Primary
Not even high school years.
No.
Yeah, quite a bit of moving around in primary school days.
Yes.
But we'll get to more on that in a little bit.
Right. And thankfully, I got the opportunity to do one high school, not as much as primary. And so I went
Good.
to Ken Carthy High School. And after that, I moved on to the Jamaica Theological Seminary, where I did my undergrad degree, and then the University of the West Indies, where I did my master's.
Nice.
Okay, great.
Nice. Sounds
Yes.
good. Sounds good.
And we have to put a plug here again. Another JTS alum, the Jamaica Theological Seminary. The one of the flagship programs, the Bachelor of Social Work. Yeah.
From one social worker to the next, eh?
Yes.
Yeah, from one social worker to the next.
Right. So Marja, I was reading in just a little part, I was just getting, familiar with the pages, and I read where you wrote in the book that girls actually feel and go through the same sort of emotions and same feelings of an absentee father. Some may say that it affects the boy more than the girl, but in your book, you're saying it affects them just the same.
It affects both.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that some more, but just tell us some more about, your earlier years. How did that play out? Like about your, what do we call that? I'm trying to find the word. Yeah.
Pre-teenage, pre-adolescent.
Yeah, not that word, but yeah.
I know that's what you're trying to get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The childhood days.
Yeah.
The so-called age of innocence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Before you transition to.
Is it the formative years? That's the word I'm looking for. The formative years. See, I got it. Yes.
Got it right. So as I started out, yes, born at Princess Margaret Hospital, then went to infant school in St. Thomas, then moved to Kingston. And I think I went to another basic school in Kingston before moving on to primary. So my early years, I grew up in a single parent household with my mother, growing up in the early childhood into childhood years, never saw my mother or father together. It was just always me and my mother. And of course, within a single parent household, there are going to be some challenge in terms of finances, discipline, different.
You're an only child?
Only child, yes.
Okay.
No brother, no sister then. That's what I knew then.
Okay.
Yes. So I grew up
interesting
in that space of being an only child, playing games that people would play with their brothers and sisters. This girl was playing with herself. So I love Chinese skip. And so I would go.
Would you play Chinese skip by yourself for the chairs?
Of course. You've got to be creative. Yeah. There's the grill.
Yes, right there.
And you jump in, jump on the line, jump out, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do those things. So being there in that space by myself and going to school, I remember days when it was real difficult. Mommy would try the best that she could with the resources that she had. And so she would send me to school, always making sure that I had something to eat. Of course, that's when I was with her. There were times when she would have had to leave me with other persons so that she could work, and be able to take care of me, to support me, and she would send money and stuff. But when you go to live in a family space with persons who are not necessarily your own family, the treatment is going to be different. Very different. There were days when I hear people talk about hunger and say, you're hungry. I had the experience of knowing what real hunger is, having stayed with persons who you have to wait until they decide that this is food time, versus when I would have been with my mom. If I say, Mommy, I'm hungry, if it's even 2 biscuits, go and eat your 2 biscuits.
Right.
You can look at sugar and water when you're with somebody else and they say they don't have it. You just have to just tough it out. And that was my experience. I remember even with growing with my mom, she really didn't have a lot of resources. So even for going to school, there was a time when I had one pair of shoes. So, you know, you have the shoes that you wear to church, you wear to school, you wear to downtown, you wear to Average.
That was the only one.
That was
Good
the
old
only
faithful.
one. And I remember wearing that shoe until the bottom of the shoe was pretty much you reach a touch ground, yeah. And so my mom stuffed it with newspaper to make sure, say, yeah, when I walk in, foot now touch concrete, yeah, padded. And what that did for me, and being in primary school, when I went to school, you know, you're playing with your friends and you're just eager, you know, we're about taking off shoes and run up and down. At a point, I stopped playing because I didn't want any of my friends, anybody to see that hole in the shoe, yeah. So those are some of the realities that I had to encounter in those years.
What age was this, Marja? And when did the reality hit that, hey, there is no daddy, or it's just me and mommy? Did you say, mommy, I see everybody is talking about daddy, no, what happened to mine? You know, at what point did that kick in?
That kicked in very, very early. As soon as I could talk, I could talk. Yeah, ask a lot of questions. I think I met my father briefly at 7 years old. I remember I was staying with this person. And one day this man came and the lady that I was staying with said, is your father? And I'm like, my father? I never know about my father before, you know. I'd asked, but of course my mother said, he's not here, she's no longer talking with him. You know, should have explained, but no longer in a relationship with him, no longer talking to him. And so he's not around, just that, yes. So of course, when I saw this man, I was like, oh, my father, okay. And he spoke to me briefly. I saw him for a short while, and then I never saw him again. I think for me, one of the things that I used to do is, having met this man and you hear that it's your father, you're like, oh, we're gonna live together. And I start daydreaming about what the possibilities are like to have a father, because naturally I would have seen other persons around me, other children, my friends with their fathers.
Especially girls and their daddies.
Yes, these girls, their father take them to school, and I daydreamed about that when I watched movies and saw girls with their father. There were times and I would just cry because I never had that, and I wished that I did.
Oh, wow. I mean, I am listening to your story, Marja, and you know, it's touching, being an adult now and hearing of these stories. But then when I was younger, as you were talking, and I was thinking about even my younger years, I grew up with both parents around. So I didn't know what it felt like to not have a father, and then especially when I'm at school, and my friends are talking about, oh, daddy gonna pick me up. It didn't seem out of sort or out of place for me, because daddy used to drop me at school, daddy used to pick me up, daddy was at PTA meetings. Let me tell you something. Up until high school, my father was still taking us, all girls, three of us, three girls. Up until high school, daddy was still taking us to school. That mommy was around, mommy was in full force, mommy was around, mommy did everything that mommies do. So she was there right out. But daddy just did all the daddy things. Daddy bought us our uniform right up to high school. Our uniform had to be the longest, you know, because daddy, anything where your knee showing, daddy said, no, that's too short. So for me to say, I know what it feels like. Oh, I've had moments where I wish daddy was around and he was not. Every time I turned, everywhere I turned, daddy was there because he was always in the home, always present. And I know this is not the reality for all girls, for all, but it's not the reality. And so when that sunk in, when I got the exposure that people are living, you know, there's no daddy around, or daddy is abusive, daddy is there but not there, I'm saying, oh my goodness, I am happy that I did not go through that, because I see some of the effects negatively, and some people do not come back from it. But here you are today, Marja. You know, what was the experience like? I'm seeing you're flourishing. You still have or I am saying that there were scars, that you
Yes.
would have, gotten from this experience. Would you like to just share some of that? The places that it puts you at times, when you thought about the whole know that is around.
Yeah.
The whole know that it is around, as I said earlier, is this daydreaming, wishing that he was around. And before I tell you like what were some of the scars, the effects, I'll share with you an encounter I had, which really impacted the next rest of my life. I mentioned seeing him briefly at 7, and then I never saw him again. And I remember one day at about age 10, thereabout, my mother, and she and I were going somewhere, and she had left me, and then she came back. This is your father. This was the first time I was actually seeing my mother and my father together in the same place, in the same space, right?
Right.
And so when she came with him, with this little boy, this is your father, this is your brother, I was like, father, brother.
Oh.
And I was excited that I had a little brother, and I was like, Then they had a discussion, and my father would have said to her, send her to live with me. And so my mother.
That's what your father said.
That's what my father said to my
Okay.
mom, after dialogue, not on that same day, but after.
Okay.
Because I'd have gone to visit him, and then I also met a sister, and I was like, oh, actually a brother and sister.
Okay.
And so I went and I visited, and that after that, the few visits, then I went supposed to live with him. However, like after 2 weeks, my mom came to look for me, to check up, to see how I was doing, which any mom would do. And that day, I recall, it was a Saturday when my mom came, and my father was at work the day. And when he got home, I remember, so while my mom was there, she had, just asked, how am I doing? Asked someone in the yard, how was I doing? And she called my stepmother, and she said she wasn't going to speak to her. Don't know what they had. I mean, they're adults. And so I remember though that when my father got home from work on that Saturday, I remember my stepmom saying to him, one of us have to go. It's either me or her. One of us had to go. And
so Marja, the brother and the sister, they were hers.
Yes, they are her children. Okay. I would have been the stepchild, the outside child. And so as she uttered that to him, I watched him as a child take my bag and packed my things up for me to go and say, tomorrow, you're going back to your mother. I didn't know then as a child what rejection, the word rejection.
Right. You didn't know it as that at the time.
Right. But I felt the sting of rejection as a child. Like one of us had to go, and I was the one who was packed up and shipped out as a child. And it was painful. I remember that throughout that night, I cried myself to sleep. The next day when he packed me up and we traveled back to where my mother was, and he left me, I wept, never cry, me ball. Like it was just so painful. Like here I am now as a child. I didn't know you for all the time. Now I get to meet you, and now you're just leaving me. What that did for me was to spiral this sense of not needed, insecurity. Like if and I was angry too, that if my own father can just leave me like that. And I remember after that, like I would have gone back a few times to look for him, and the reception was really not good. And so as a child, you can detect when you're not welcome in a space.
Yeah, because children are so intuitive.
Yes. And so after a while, I said to my mommy, Mommy, I don't want to go back there.
Right.
And she said, well, you don't have to, you don't have to go. And I was relieved that she would have supported me on that, to say that I don't have to. So in terms of the level of insecurity, I began to think that this man, he now became this man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Should have defended me.
I'm preempting myself, but did you ever call him daddy?
At that time?
Yeah. No.
As a child, I don't recall.
How did you relate? Okay.
Recall that calling him daddy. Maybe I did, but I really don't remember as a child then.
Right.
And then not after that, I never went back. He never came. He never looked for me. He never, nothing. That was just it. I never saw him again throughout childhood years. What that also did for me, as like, in terms of, as I said, you're a girl, you're growing up, and talking to guys, or friends talking about different stuff that they share with their father. I had a friend who I would follow her on occasions to go and look for her father to collect lunch money, and just wishing that knowing how difficult it was for my mother to find food for me, to find stuff for me, just wishing that I too had a father who was supportive of me, was giving financial support, and just being there, even if not the financial support, but just being there, knowing that I can connect with a father, I can talk with him, I can go out with him. I just never had that. I think that also left me in this state of panic attack. Persons talk about that, it's real. I've experienced that, like the moving earlier. I spoke about different schools that I had to move to. Every time that I had to move, and it sent me into a state of depression, really out of it. Like, do I have to do this? Why do I have to do this again? What's wrong with me? That's the thing, beating up on myself and just feeling like, do I really belong anywhere? Who do I belong to? As I got a little older, one of the things that resulted from that, which I never knew then, but I learned later in late teens, early 20s, is that I had this desire always, when I began to date older. I spoke to some younger guys, but it was mainly like gravitating towards older men. They had to be 40 and over because that's what I like. I later discovered that really what I was looking for was a father.
Exactly.
Marja, just going back a little bit, you mentioned briefly high school and, following your friend to collect lunch money from her father. But at high school, or primary or high school, did this affected your behavior in school, your performance, did it any at all affect those areas?
I think more so performance. I've always been told, oh, you have the potential to do more, you have the potential. But there are some points where I just didn't care, because you're working hard, but then you wishing that daddy would be there to support you. Your mommy's there.
Yeah, I asked because in your line of work, being a social worker, and with all that's happening in the schools now, as two teenagers fight, it's quick to say something must be going on at home. Probably there's no father in the home. Probably there's no father figure. So I asked because of that, and you would have experienced clients or families with a probably similar situation.
Yes, I have. I mean, in the line of work that I do, as you
Yeah.
said, that's why a social worker, quite a number of, when you look at the reports and you see the behavioral problems, when I get to speak with the children and the parents, invariably when you talk to the mother, she's like, well, the father not here. You talk to the child and what's happening right here. And the child would be like, oh, they wish that their father was present. They wish that he was there. Daddy said that he was coming last month, last year, and up to this point, he has not showed. So this is them acting up to get the attention and the stuff. I remember even in high school, the teenage years, there was a point where I just really, I don't know what it was, if it was some transition moment, wanting to have a daddy. So I would just randomly be walking on the road and I see a man and I'd be like, daddy. I just wanted,
I don't want to laugh, Marja, but it's crazy.
Wow.
It's crazy.
I mean, I've had that experience with young children, with toddlers. You know, I've been
call everybody daddy.
You know,
I guess they're just using words.
But I've never heard of that. You know, as an older person, you
teenage,
right, consciously and subconsciously.
I think one of the other things that it did for me in terms of behavioral problems, we know out of the research, behavioral problems is one of the things that absentee father affect. For me though, girl was afraid of beating, and girl was not going to get beating to do things that are bad, but girl was very feisty. And so I think part of the hurt that I was carrying caused me to be like very sarcastic and rude. So I would say some things out. I think that came out of the pain that I was carrying as a result of that.
Right. We're coming up on a short break, Marja. But just before we go to the break, I want to maybe have you digress just a little bit. The switch now from the story, the journey, and put on your sociologist hat, your counselor training, that kind of hat, and go back to the reaction of the stepmother. Why do adult women do that? I mean, what threat is the ultimatum that she gave your father, me or this other child, this young innocent little girl? What's up with that? Why do adult women do stuff like that?
I'm not so clear that I can speak on the why they do it, because people have different motives for doing things.
Right.
What I would say though is what I would want to think is that women need to be mindful. If you are going to take on a relationship with a man and the man has the child is an extension of the man. And so you're deciding that you're taking on the combo, the package, not that you're taking on the responsibility to say, no, I'm taking on this child to go take care of, to go wash clothes, go do that. But the child is a part of the man. So accept that. And when you get into the space, understand that if it was your child, if it was your child, how would you want your child to be treated?
Exactly.
I think.
But then he said adult women, but he needs to add mature to that.
Mature, that's for sure, because I'm thinking that some women are treating the child as a competition and also treating the child as if the child is an adult who is going to be taking their space. A child cannot take your space. A child will always be a child to their parent. You will always be the spouse to your spouse. And so I think quite often what happens is that some men get into relationship where the truth is sometimes some men don't say to the woman that they're getting involved with that they have another child.
There is that too.
Right. In other cases, they would have said it and the woman decide that, hey, I don't want this child around. And I just believe that as men, well, I'm not a man, but men need to stand up, take up the rightful position, own up your child and decide how your child is treated. Because if a man stands up and say, this is my child comes here, my child stays with me, my child is a part of me. If a man is willing to stand up and say that, then the woman is going to either decide, is she going to stay with him or not? But if he doesn't say anything, then it gives way to the woman, if she's insecure, to push her insecurity, to push the issues that she's facing on the child and on the father as well.
That's it. Yeah.
Great. I mean, there's a whole lot going on there. There are so many things of your story that remind me of my story. So I just say that in my own case, as a late teen in college, at community college. Lots of high school and going over into community. No, it was high school, because things changed a bit in college when, in my case, my stepmother, and I ended up going to the college where she was one of the lecturers at that college, and things kind of changed a little bit. But during high school years, when I would call my father and she would answer the phone, it was almost as if, like I had to be begging to get to talk to him, kind of a thing. So, I can relate to some of what you've shared, your own story. Great stuff. We want to hear more. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back to hear more from Marja Elaine, author of Call Him Daddy, A Daughter's Journey into Forgiving an Absentee Father. Don't you go anywhere.
Welcome back to episode 8 of This Is Us podcast. And we have tonight with us Marja Elaine, an author, life coach, counselor, social worker, here with us tonight, talking about the effects of an absentee father having gone through similar experiences, but she is an overcomer. And she is here this evening to share her own journey and her own story, real life things. Marja, we have some comments and questions for you from our fans over on
Facebook.
All right, so let's go.
Comments, not any question as yet. Lisa Henderson, hi Lisa, greetings. Lisa Henderson, another JTS alumnus, by the way. So it's so true. A lot of Jamaican girls did not have an active father figure in their lives. And there's a Tedra Bennett who seems to know you. She says, Lady Marja, with a couple emojis, greetings. And then Tedra says, SMH, it is a serious situation, very serious, yes. Tedra. Then Lisa again, thanks for the interaction, guys. Lisa again said, true, not having a father figure and maybe having a mother who is too busy. The child feels unwanted and demotivated. Real stuff. Tedra says, pain and anger. And then she says, good job, Lady Marja. Keep the comments coming, folks. Keep the comments coming. Yes. And of course, if you have a question for our guests, please feel free to drop it right here.
Right. So Marja, I spoke earlier that you mentioned in your book that girls and boys feel the similar effects of an absentee father. And I'm just going to read a little sentence from the book. Often we speak of the impact that father absence has on children. We mainly narrow in on sons more than daughters. Marjaalaine has proved through her book that girls are equally as negatively affected as boys whenever a daddy is absent. Now, Marja, talk to us some more about that. When I know you said that you wanted to date older men, you see men on the road and say, hey, daddy, daddy, daddy. But how does it look for boys? Do they run around and say daddy, daddy, daddy? And how does it look?
How does it look for boys? So the major is the behavioral problem, the acting out, the giving trouble. Of course, we know, just like girls, boys want affirmation from a male figure, masculine figure. And when they don't get that, we are likely to see them being engaged in gangs and gang violence, which we see so prevalent here in Jamaica. We have heard of the different crews, fatherless crew, different crews that are formed with men, boys who did not grow up with their father. Father is absent either by choice or the father was killed. And we see the level of violence and crime that comes from them. So the behavioral problem is one. Of course, there's also the struggle. They struggle financially because in a single parent household, we know, we have heard it, boy, them can't eat, the girls may eat, but the boy, them can't have enough. And when their mother, you know, by themselves with the little wage that they're getting is not able to provide for them, there are cases where you would have had a boy stealing to make ends meet. And sometimes too, the boys thinking that, hey, there's no man in the house, and now I have to take up this manly responsibility and behave like a man. And so pretty early, they're taking on responsibility, which is none of their business. And so they grow up in spaces where
there's no time to explore their childhood and experiences that brings, and freedom too, you know? Just to get to know themselves.
Yeah, that's one of it. They don't have the level of anger too. I mean, in the space, as I tell you, that I work as a social worker and work with families, you see oftentimes the boys and the parents are like, Miss Francis, talk to them for me now. You speak to them, they're so angry. Why are they angry? They're angry that daddy has not kept his promises. Just like a girl, she expects her father to be there. The boy, if daddy says that he's going to be present, the boy has an expectation that daddy will own up to his responsibility. Daddy will be there. We know that parents are the first persons that children learn from. They learn love from. They learn affection, you know, and how to be supportive. And when they don't have that support from their parents, it does affect both the boys and the girl. And we see so many times we talk about boys not knowing how to love, not knowing how to show affection and stuff. Even though sometimes when the father is there, he wants to puff them up, but at least they know that he's present. He's showering them with love. He's teaching, he's guiding them into different things that they need. So when the transition in the teenage years, the father is there to teach them masculinity. When they don't see that modeled in the home, you know, it creates a whole level of challenge as they get into adulthood, they get into relationship. They are not so sure how to navigate that space because daddy is not available.
Marja, you have touched on so many important things, and I'm going to call this part 1 of episode 8 because we have not even gone on to touch on the forgiveness. Because here you are, flourishing, looking pretty, writing book. So you must have reached at a point where, hey, I am going through my stuff. I have acknowledged what this is. There is a name to it. There is help. I have sought help. And now I'm here to help others as you are doing along your journey. And so tonight, I think we're going to call this part 1 of episode because we want you to come back.
I was just looking at the time.
And we have to wrap up, but the conversation is so sweet.
Right. I hope
and informative.
It will be great if you can actually join us next week again, just so we have to keep the continuity.
Yes.
But it's not as, all right, great.
Yes.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have our listeners come back to hear the how. How were you able to forgive this man? We want to make sure we have enough time to get into that. So let's kind of take it down for now with the importance of it. Why? Because we wanted to have you share this burden of forgiving the absentee father. Why should a child have to bear that burden? In other words, why is it important At the end of the day, the child didn't ask to be born. The child didn't ask to be abandoned, right? The child didn't ask to be neglected. But you are saying, you are positing from the very title of your book that the affected, the wounded should desire that restitution, that reconciliation. Why is that important? Why is that so important, Marja?
You speak of the forgiveness, the child forgiven, why should the child carry that burden? I want to posit that it ain't a burden. What is the burden is continuously or choosing to continue the hurt and the pain and the resentment that any child would have felt as a result of the father leaving, neglecting them. For me, forgiveness is freedom. Yes, it is. All of us want to be forgiven. Yes, all of us have something that we want somebody to forgive us for, and that we would want to forgive somebody. So any child, I would say, who chooses to forgive their father is actually unburdening themselves, releasing the issue.
Lots of people need to hear that, Marja, so that has to be repeated over and over. The same for those in the back.
Say it again.
So any child who chooses to forgive their father for being absent, for neglecting them, is actually unburdening themselves by releasing the pain, releasing the hurt, releasing the anger, the resentment, and choosing to forgive their father. Forgiveness is freedom. For years, and that will take some doing, I guess, in the next show. When I met him and I spoke to him, but I just didn't know, what do I call this man? He was never there. How do I relate to him?
Upward.
Right? How do I forgive him? How do I move from a space of being back then calling him sperm donor, the man, to get into a place to call him daddy? It took a work. It took a work to choose to forgive. But I say to persons, forgiveness is powerful. It frees you, the offendee, even if the offender doesn't say that they're sorry, because the truth is, some men, because of pride or other things, they will not say that they're sorry for being absent.
So lots of people do not know.
And they don't know the extent to which they hurt you. And so it's on the onus is on you to free yourself and choose to forgive that person, your father, who was left, who was neglected, was not played his role in your life. Release him.
Yeah. All right. So, release him and call him daddy. So this is the book. This is what the book looks like. Tell us, where can we get copies of the book? And as I suspect, there may be some persons who might want to connect with you even before we get to the rest of the story and the journey. Where can we get the book, and how can persons reach you?
Sure. So I have physical copies. If persons need to get a copy from me, they can hook me up on Instagram, Marja_Muse. Send me a message, direct message, or on Facebook, Marjaalaine Francis. And the book is on Amazon. You can just go on Amazon, look for Call Him Daddy, A Daughter's Journey to Connecting with and Forgiving an Absentee Father. The hard copy for me, it's $2,500 on Amazon. It's about $15. And you can also get the hard copy or the Kindle version for those who don't want to print and just want to listen. Yes, you can get your copy on Amazon as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you, Marja, for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
On part 1 of episode 8. It is good stuff. It's so refreshing to hear these stories, to hear what's going on the journey, because you're still journeying and you have other persons who you are journeying with as well. Yes. And those who are sharing their stories with you, and stories that you can connect with, stories that you can relate to, stories that you can share your overcoming tools and everything with. And so it's very good to hear, real life stories from real life people in front of you. So really appreciate this. Your journey was not meant for you. Your journey was meant to share with others. And so we're happy that you were here tonight to share your journey with us and with those who have and will listen to us as we continue this.
Thank you for the
podcast.
opportunity to share. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
It's as we said, when we were thinking about the show, that when we say our story, your story, our journey, your journey, that's what that is about. We have had our own stories, we have had our own journeys, but we want persons to know that this podcast is about our collective journey.
Yes, so we're journeying
people, as human beings, as Jamaicans, as Caribbean people, as Black people, right? As young people, as working professionals, whatever it is,
as
so many
people.
of the commonalities that we share. We have so much more in common that if we can recognize that and focus less on our differences, that we will have a better nation, a better
Certainly.
world. Yeah. Tedra says again, good job, Marja. So proud of you, sis. And Lisa says again, forgiveness is the beginning of healing. Absolutely right, Lisa. Spot on. And so we'll hear some more, get more into the forgiveness aspect of it. Lord's willing, next week, Thursday, same time, Thursday evening, 8:30. The podcast is going to be there on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, there on the Facebook page. And remember to follow us on Instagram at This Is Us Jones Clan. And also we are on Gospel City Radio, gospelcity247.com, the online radio station, reaching persons in the UK, in the US and Canada. And there's more to come, right? More places coming soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it about love, and stay safe until next time. Cheers.
I'm Latoya Berry Jones, and this is my co-host,
Teddy
Jones.
And
this is us.
Cheers.